since 2020, after the murder of my son in 2016. So I'm grateful, one, that we've been able to help hundreds of people over the past few years. But I think this year, especially, we put our heart and soul in it. One of the greatest things is that I've gotten a real mission-based board, and which you're a part of, which I am so extremely grateful for you and the other board members. Getting that in line really makes a difference when you have a nonprofit organization to find a board that has the same passion um, and wants and needs of something that you took from infancy and to build. And we're still growing. But this year we've done some amazing things. I know you and I worked on the lost seminar, which was a loved ones suddenly stolen. We focused on an in-person seminar here in my hometown of Ohio, part of Ohio, and we came together and we had an incredible seminar where we just talked about losing loved ones to overdose, suicide, those stigmas, those biases, and how they're different. Because one of the things that we've uncovered with Grief to Hope is that we as a society have a really strong stigma, bias, I should say, against those that have lost their lives or lost loved ones to um, overdose or suicide. And we don't provide them as much sympathy as we would for someone that, for example, lost someone to cancer or health benefits. And we've really got to get that out into the society to make a difference. We've got to start talking about it. We've got to understand that the people that are left behind deserve that same amount of respect and support. And so that's one of the things we've done. Three of our Grief to Hope sessions where we are virtual 7-week programs. We are getting ready to finalize this third one coming up Thursday. But we're going to start a new one in a few weeks. So we'll be doing four total for the year. As well as we did our first butterfly release this year, which, yes, it was an amazing experience. Let me tell you, I was a little nervous about it, but not because of the experience, but I was worried about the butterflies because I had never had done anything with them. But it turned out to be a beautiful, magical experience that was live streamed and recorded, and you can catch that on the website. But reading names out loud for me, um, and I know that you felt this as well, it was just a powerful experience, and we got to read over 100 names as one of our charity events. Basically, we had a little bit of a speech, and then we read the names of loved ones that had purchased butterflies in their loved ones' names. And then we released them, and that's where I got the anxiety because they ship these butterflies in, and they're in a box, and you don't know what to expect until you open the box. Like you can't just open the box because they'll fly out. But it turned out pretty good. I had to give him a little bit of coaxing out of the box, but it was amazing. And we were grateful for the people that allowed us to have it. That Legacy Village, they basically were like, yes, come back every year. Please use our space. They loved it as well. So that was probably the highlights of Grief to Hope this year was our seminars, our in-person events. Of course, networking is awesome. Um, yeah, those are probably my top three.
That's fantastic because the butterfly release, I remember watching that and I was so proud of you accomplishing that and to seeing that like my name was called for my grandmother and then my partner's and her childhood friend. And it was like emotional because when I told her about it, she was like so surprised. She's like, "Really? You did that? You did that for?" I was like, "Yeah, but, the person that I'm assisting with and who I'm a part of her board." She was saying that, and that's why it was so important because it was unexpected on
Yeah.
her part, right? And it was so beautiful because I don't know anyone that doesn't like butterflies.
Right, right. I know, and they're gorgeous. They were beautiful butterflies, so it was an amazing experience.
I know that the season now for Grief to Hope, the group sessions is coming to an end. Um, what is something that really stood out about the sessions this time around for you?
Yeah, so our third session was really, it was probably the first time ever we had the majority was new. Usually, what happens with Grief to Hope, and I love this, is that we have participants that come and participate in the 7 week program, and then they repeat it. And some people repeat it continuously. I have like yourself and some other people that have come because they understand the impact of sharing their story with anyone that's new to join. And this session is probably our first session where the majority of the participants are brand new to Grief to Hope. And so we usually have range from 20 to 25 that attend, and I'd say 80% of who's attended is brand new to Grief to Hope. So I'm hoping that they'll come back and they will join our next session and sort of give their impact and what Grief to Hope has done in their time of participation. So I think that's one of the biggest takeaways this year. Is the amount of new people that we've enrolled, as well as I love seeing the favorite faces and the amount um, of people that speak up and that are willing to participate because they may have joined the last 7 weeks and they just listened, and then they came back this 7 weeks and they were ready to talk. One of the ladies that I'm so proud of, she listened the first 7 weeks and then she came back this 7 weeks and she spoke twice. And she's just learning that courage and that strength of sharing her story and how much it means to her to share it, but it also impacts those that just are on the journey and really have no idea what they're getting ready to embark on. So hearing people's stories from different phases of their grief is so impactful.
Especially as you mentioned, like even those newer faces, you probably have some people that are a year into it, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and they're finding the courage not only to show up week to week, day to
Mhm.
day, month to month, also that they're sharing. And do you see then, in your opinion, what could maybe be some of the obstacles that people will face when they're not a part of the group, but they're in their everyday life and they're still trying to work through their grief that they're experiencing?
Yeah, absolutely. Grief is it's hard work. And I'm 8+ years into it and I still have those days. One of the things that I want to first emphasize is that grief takes very many valleys and hills and different paths, and every single unique is different. Even your own grief is unique and different for different people. My grief is different for my son than it is for my grandmother or for my aunt who I've lost, cousins. Um, I think one of the hardest things with people to get through is to understand that it's grief and that it's unique, their grief is unique, and that it's not going to go in a sequential order, right? There's times where you go through, I know that they talk about stages. Um, you may go through stage, denial before you go through, you know, the shock. There's just different ways that grief is completely evolved. and your way is completely different than your neighbors, your parents, your friends. Um, and you have to understand that you have to have that grief patience with yourself, and that you have to really understand where you're at, be honest with yourself, and look for resources, right? Because different things fit for different people. Some people comfortable with a grief to hope support group. Some people may want one-on-one. Some people may want counseling. Some people may not want to speak of it for months or years, but you also got to be careful of where you are, and that you should be moving forward in a comfortable, patient way for yourself. Um, but there's so many resources out there, so many people that are willing to help, no matter what the passing involved, whether it's murder, suicide, overdose, cancer. There's so many resources for all different types of passings, that there's something to fit everyone. There is absolutely something to fit everyone. And if you aren't sure, just keep leaning in, asking for advice, ask for people's opinions, talk to somebody you trust, find out, social media has so many alternatives and resources. There's something out there for everyone. So don't feel like you have to do this alone, and there are absolutely free resources as well.
I'm glad you mentioned the resources part is because a couple of days ago, I was watching online and someone was speaking to someone who was actually suicidal
Mm,
because their mother had passed away, and to them, their parents passed away, mother and father. They're down on the luck financially, and they're just struggling. There's nothing more for me to live for because they tied so much of themselves to these two people, like a lot of people when
mm,
it's your parents or your
mm.
child and so on,
Right.
right? And I remember watching this interview and they're sharing this story, and the person who was sharing it was like, I didn't know what resources were available to me
Hmm.
because they're trying to have this conversation with this person. They need resources for them, but that person probably just wanted someone to talk to. But I think sometimes we forget that there wasn't resources for the person who doesn't have the training.
Hmm. Right. Oh
Right?
yeah.
Right? Do you see gaps in that where people want to help and they have all good intentions, but after they're helping or after the situation has maybe passed and calmed down, they may need some help themselves, but now they don't even know where to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the greatest things that we have is, the 988 number, or, findhelp.com. I think it's findhelp.com. There are so many resources out there for so many different things. But what I want people to understand is to go back and to make sure that you follow up with that person. That if you are helping someone, one, it's the greatest feeling ever is to help someone. That's why I do what I do, is to help and to serve. I get a gift every time. And it's incredible, but I want to make sure that you're absolutely right. You've got to take time. I have to take time out for hope, because as I'm helping and serving, I've got to make sure that my plate isn't running empty as well. And so I think that if you constantly are helping or serving, one, to follow back with that person to make sure that they're okay, right? That the impact that you made and the choices and the suggestions, so many times we drop the ball when it comes to helping people. We're all get to go, 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 and then, same thing with like grief. Like first 2 weeks, first 2 months, we're all there, we're all helping, right? And then we go back to our normal lives of living, and that person is still feeling, that grief is still there. And a lot of times they haven't even touched their grief yet in the 2 months. So always go back and check in. That's one. Two, I think that, like I said, find resources for yourself. Make sure your cup is full, and what you need and how you need those resources. And don't look at it as, well, I can't help this person because I can't get help. Look at it as, I've helped this person, now I need to help myself. right? And so a lot of times, and this is what I love about what we do, Terrain, is that when we share experiences outside of our normal lives, and what I mean by that is everyday occurrences, mental health, job, career, struggles with relationships. When we talk about losing a loved one, when we talk about grief, when we talk about, I'm at my wit's end, I'm at my final straw, when we are expressing these, that is opening up a conversation that never would have happened had we just kept it to ourselves. So even though some of us feel like we need to isolate, we don't want to bother people with our problems or our issues, what we're doing is a disservice to those that are going through probably the same exact things, feeling they're isolated, they're alone because they don't want to bother somebody. So, whenever you feel like you need to share or express emotions, do it because it is so impactful to those that are experiencing mental health, grief, death, all of these kinds of things in our society. We're looked at social media where everything's great and we're hunky dory and we're going on these vacations and our family gets along beautifully, and all these personas, but we don't talk about today, about lost it, you know, in the traffic lane, right? About, I had this road rage and I don't know where it came from. Or, I'm really struggling with this, or I'm having a hard time with that. If we started to share those more, then I think the world would be a better place because we wouldn't feel so isolated and alone and like we are the only ones that are going through that, right?
Do you then think that there's a little bit of maybe shame or guilt in feeling the full spectrum of emotions, either from happiness, isolation, loneliness, anger, and so on?
I think that one of the things that social media has created that everyone lives in this perfect world, and when you don't fit into that bubble, it's almost like you're an outcast or you don't belong in that. And I think um one, if we talk about it and we get it out and we say what we're going on, what's really honestly feeling, and this doesn't have to be blasted on social media, right? You don't have to tell your whole world. But some people do, and I honor that. Like some people literally get on social media and express their raw truth, and I think that's amazing. But I think to answer your question, I think that a lot of people have shame because they just don't know other people are feeling. Uh, Listen, when I first had my first panic attack, I was like, what in the world is this? I had no idea, right? And I remember feeling like asking people, going, have you ever had this? Has this ever happened to you? And people are like, no, no, never happened. Until I ran into somebody that actually had experienced it. And then I found more people that had experienced it. That isolation, of I felt, okay, there's something seriously wrong with me until I found other people that were going through it or had been. And that's where we share, this worked for me, right? This may not work for you, but this worked for me, and this is how I dealt with it. And I just think it's a place where we just need to get to be to acceptance, as people are, just where they're at, what they need, and no judgment and no shame in that. But again, we've got a long way to go.
One of my friends, when she first had her child a couple of years ago, um, where she lives now, there's this community of new parents, and what they do is they get together, and there's parents that, there's a community of parents that are new parents, current parents, and seasoned parents, right? And it's a nice community because they share their experiences. Oh, when I first had my child, this is what I went through. Now, 5 years in, this is what I went through. And when you mention grief community and sharing the experience, it reminded me of that. Like imagine a community where someone's 5 years in, and this is what I felt day one. And then you
Hmm.
have someone else saying that, oh yeah, I hope I felt that on day one. This is what I felt on month number three. And same thing. When you mention that we still have a long way to go, what do you then think is maybe some of the steps that myself, you, or others can take to help bridge that gap in the knowledge piece or the experiences.
Yeah, I think we've come really far with mental health as far as making it not stigmatized as much, but we have a long way to go. But I think with grief, we have a huge amount of leaps and bounds to go. The crazy thing about grief is everybody is going to go through it. 99.9% of us are going to go through it. And there's going to be different facets throughout our whole lives. But that's just for loss of loved ones, right? That's not grieving, your kids empty nesting, getting married. I talk about this all the time. When you get married, you're no longer single. That person that you used to be, the one and only person now has to validate and make sure that that second person, that couple, that togetherness, you're now as one. And so you no longer have that vision or that version of you. So that's a grief. Losing a job is a grief. Losing a marriage is a grief. Graduating. When you graduate from high school and you either go into college or into a different career, you are now an adult. And so you're treated as such, but nobody gives you like the adulting 101, right? Like how to balance a checkbook or how to fix a tire or, how to do health insurance, right? So grief in itself is always throughout our lives, even though it may not be a loss of loved one, it could be the loss of your identity as you know it. And so that's where we have to talk about it. We have to come together. And I love that community with the new parents and the man, would I have loved that when I was a new parent, right? Actually, now I'd still love it. That's a great idea because I think sharing those processes, again, everybody's different and everybody's individualized, and not everybody has the same parenting but there's so many different things you can learn from others who have been there, done that, that it's empowering for you as a person to say, okay, I watched Hope grieve the loss of her son, and this is what she did, right? And this is what she continues to do. So it's almost like it can be someone's survival story or someone's path that you're creating by just sharing your experience. So I think it really takes from, being honest with your family and friends. If you're comfortable in doing some people are private, they'll never share, and that's okay. That's their absolute business. But I think if we share and we relate to people where they're at and where you're at in an honest and caring way, I think most of us would listen with ears wide open because I think one of the things that we are as humans is we've consistently learned. We're always learning. We're always, trying to figure out. And so if we had someone to say, this is what happened to me in your situation, wouldn't that be amazing to say, I have an option, I have a choice, right? Same thing with parenting. Like, am I a tough love parent? Am I, gentle parent? Am I, the old fashioned whip your butt kind of parent? But if I had all different sides to choose from, I can figure out what's right for me and why not? So I think that's the biggest thing is we just got to be open and honest and um, figure out what works best for us, but to have options.
I agree that communication is always the key, and I agree that options is key. Do you want to cry? Do you want to yell? Do you want to break something? Like there's these
Yeah.
events. I don't know if they have them where you are in Ohio, but you can literally just go to a room and just break things.
We do have that somewhere here, but
Right.
isn't that cool concept?
Absolutely. Imagine like you just had one of those days where you're not as emotionally strong
Yeah,
from your loss of identity, your loss of person. You just want to break something. And I think that's probably what is missing is the option because for some people it's okay, I can cry from Friday evening to Monday morning, but then Monday morning I gotta go to work.
yeah,
So now I don't have the option, right? Like,
right.
do you see some of the people that you've come in contact with that they will put their grief on the back burner because life in quotations now, is still
Mhm.
happening, and they maybe have to make time for that more so than the loss of identity or a person or whatever it is that they're grieving.
Yeah, absolutely. It happens so much. And I love that breaking thing because I'll tell you what, somebody went through that and that helped them. And so they knew that that was an option, right? That's what I'm talking about with the options. They're like, hey, this worked for me. And everybody's like, yeah, I'd love to break crap. But again, that's an option. But as far as grief, I'm putting it on the back burner. Oh my gosh, I see this in many different forms. A lot of times it's siblings with parents. And what I mean by that is a parent loses a child and there's two or three siblings. And then the siblings decide that they needed to take care of mom or dad, and their grief wasn't as severe as mom and dad's, and so they sort of put their grief on the shelf as well, until mom and dad are okay, or they don't feel like it's valued enough, like they lost their brother or sister but mom lost, her son or daughter. So I see that a lot in siblings. I see it a lot in male versus female roles in the family where mother and father, um, mom gets more sympathy, more empathy than dad. Dad feels like it's his job to take care of mom and to go back to work and just do the manly thing and to put his grief on the shelf. I know that, and you know this being with Grief to Hope, that so many men don't even grieve till like year two, right? Because they're so busy trying to take care of everything and everyone that they end up putting their grief on the shelf. And then unfortunately, when they pull it down off that shelf in year two, then everybody's like, what are you doing? Why are you so distraught? It's been 2 years, right? And they're like, I never got to grieve. I was taking care of everyone else. And that can go for moms too, right? Or spouses, or, especially when with spouses, the arrangements, the financial aspect of it all, can really take the emotional out of it, and you've just got to get things accomplished. And so, it is with all losses, but I think with spousal, you have that loss of income, however that may be, plays in such a part where you've got to start figuring out all the puzzle pieces, and your grief gets put on the shelf for that. And you know, and some people, they don't even want to deal with the grief, so they push it off in a way because it is so incredibly painful to feel that they'll put it away, right? And it's just in, I'm sure there's all kinds of clinical terms for all of this, but I think that one of the main things we have to understand is that grief doesn't go away no matter how much we'd love it to, right? I know for me personally, I kept looking for a finish line. And I was like, where is this finish line? Where is this pain going to stop, right? And I come to understand that that finish line doesn't exist. Um, but I have to keep moving forward and keep living, but I do with my grief. Like it's with me 24/7, but I have to keep reminding myself to keep moving forward and not get stuck in that position where it is at a point where I wasn't moving forward, or I wasn't, moving at a good pace, for me personally. So I think there's a lot of different factors that go into grief, and it gets put on a shelf, and but the main thing is um, to feel, to feel, and to find resources that help you do that.
There was someone I knew, she was experiencing grief, but it was more so not a loss of a person, but a loss of identity.
Hmm.
And her identity, well, she did lose someone, but then she went back to work, and that was how she was handling her grief, like a lot of people do. Let me bury myself in work. I'll work 10 hours, 12 hours, 14 hours. I'll sleep at my
Right,
job, right?
right,
Forget the
right,
family at home, because seeing their
right.
faces would just remind me.
Yes.
And then I remember asking her this question. I was like, do you ever see a life without your job? And she was like, no. And the reason why I asked her this question is she started to get pains in her hands, pains in her legs because she was working so much to distract herself
Yeah.
from the grief. So now her body was showing it and saying, "Hey, pay attention to me. You're getting sick doing this."
Hmm.
Um, and I share this story because I wonder then, and I'll ask you this, how many people end up more
Hmm.
sick or their body starts to break down because instead of maybe trying to work through their grief or at least acknowledge it, they're trying to distract themselves from it by burying it somewhere else. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I love that. Presenteeism is huge right now, and the industries of business have not figured out how to make grief work in the workplace. And that's just one of the points. When we grieve, we emotionally and physically grieve. So it's not just in our minds and our emotions. There can be some physical aspects. I know that I've heard of menopause coming into, early menopause. I've heard of, of course, I've talked about brain fog a lot. Um, I think that I don't know the statistics right off my head, but I know that presenteeism plays a major role in businesses and industries where people are showing up to work to distract themselves from the grief. They're emotionally not prepared to go back into the workforce, but they have to earn a paycheck. And we all know that most of us don't go to work for fun, right? We go to work to earn a paycheck. And so, for a lot of us, that presenteeism cost the company as well. The companies suffer from absenteeism, you know, errors at work. You know, those are the kinds of things that people are basically they're present, but they're not. They're here, they're at work, they're getting their paycheck, but they're not performing at a rate or a performance where they used to be. And that's a huge billions of dollars are lost because we don't provide grief in the workplace the amount of respect that's due. Do I know a solution? I know a couple of things that can help with that. But I think one of the biggest takeaways with grief in the workplace is one is that you've got to really look at the aspect of how that person's doing when they come back to work, how their performance is. And of course, I'm all about you need to earn, you need to be profitable, but you have to look at the aspect if I lost this great employee because he wasn't performing at top level, he was just showing up. How do I get them to be that top level employee? And that may be a progressive amount of time. But I look at that in a way that if you lost that employee, you would have to still hire someone new in and progressively get them to the point where that person was. So why not utilize that employee that was performing at top level and just allow them some help, some encouragement, some development, some coaching, um, and get them where they need to be, but also be patient and also allow support for that employee. So that's one of my biggest things with workplace. But diving into the workplace is huge. I think diving into finding a purpose and passion is crucial. That's what Grief to Hope is all about. Is with Grief to Hope, I want you to find a passion or purpose or a focus for the day. And that's what we're all about is finding that passion, that purpose to get you out of bed, to get you motivated, to get you to that space where it's not today's going to suck, tomorrow's going to suck. Because I guarantee you today's going to suck and tomorrow's going to suck if that's the way that your mindset is. But if you have a focus and it can be as big or small as you need it to find that passion or focus in honoring your loved one or in honoring yourself or in honoring what your passions and your purposes were before, I promise you that will start to build that momentum of getting up and moving forward every single day. So I think there's a lot of work to be done in grief in the workplace. I think there's a lot of work to be done with presenteeism and how we support those coming back. I think Canada does an amazing job supporting their bereaved people, way better than us in the States. But I think that there's a lot of work to be done and a lot of decisions that need to be made that's way above my head, but I'd be glad to provide my input on it.
I agree. I think that if we can look from it from like we could be more balanced,
Yes.
right? I want
Yes.
this employee, I want this person to come back as the person they are today because they're no longer the person they were a day before this
Mhm.
traumatic experience. And there could be things about the job that's activating them. Maybe the demands is too much. Maybe them going back and being they're going to be a different type of parent, a different
Mhm.
parent, different type of spouse, different type of person in the community. And one question I want to ask for you as we close, Hope, is that if I were to give you three wishes, what are three things you wish people knew about grief activators in their life and why?
Oh, wow. So, grief activators, aka triggers, I think one of the first things is that we have to prepare and plan for them. Now, you're not going to know it first when it happens, right? Because that's what it's a grief activator. It activates your grief. But I think once it has happened, I think one of the wishes would be to know when it happens what your emotions and feelings were and how it happened, right? If it's a sound, a smell, a song, something that, an experience, a movie, those kind of things, we have to be open to say, okay, this happened. Now what? So the first is to realize it. I wish that we realize it when it does happen, what we're feeling and what we're going through. The second wish is to say, okay, how can I change that mindset when it does happen again? Or if how can I prepare myself to handle this in a more secure way for me, a more safe space? And then the third wish would be um, it's normal to know that it's normal, to know that it could happen years down the road. These grief activators that we go through could be 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. We don't know where they came from, and it just acts